Imagine Paris Charles de Gaulle Airport on a Christmas day. Imagine the hustle and the bustle there. Large crowd of travelers trying to catch their flight. I was there on Christmas morning, 2013, about to leave for a family vacation in the US. We were happy to go for that. The kids were thrilled to leave behind cold, grayish Paris weather and enjoy Disney World. As we were about to board the flight, my phone rang. I looked at the number, I didn't recognize it, but I recognized the country code, 216 for Tunisia. I hesitated a moment. Is this the time to answer an unknown phone call? And then I did. It was a call from the Prime Minister designate of Tunisia, somebody I didn't know. And he told me that my name was highly recommended to him, and he wanted to offer me the post of Minister of Higher Education, Scientific Research, and Information and Communication Technologies in his new transition government. And he told me this is a custom-made job because you are a professor and business school dean, so you understand about academia and research, and your field is information and communication technologies. So since I wanted to have a smaller cabinet, I merged 3 ministries into one, and I'm making this offer to you to lead these 3 departments. After the big surprise, and after catching my breath, I thanked him for the offer and for the honor. He told me to stop by his office that afternoon or the next day to discuss details. So I had to tell him I am about to leave for a 10-day family vacation in the US and apologize for not being able to fly right away to Tunis. Then he offered me some details about the job to think about it. He told me, we are a transition government with limited mandate, so this offer is for you for just 1 year, at the end of which you will be fired. And he told me, you'll be paid peanuts compared to your comfortable Paris job as professor and dean. And he warned me that I'll be facing some severe difficulties during the mandate. But he told me that I cannot complain, and I cannot even resign my position. I promised to be in touch, and after I hung up the phone, I looked at my wife and my kids around me, and I saw very worried faces. They were able to make some sense out of the bits of the conversation they heard. So they told me, who was that, and what was it about? I told them, well, it's a kind of Christmas present I didn't expect, and they didn't want. But I can unwrap it for you. So I explained to them the matter, and all in one voice told me, you are not going to accept this job, aren't you? You don't need it. We as a family, we don't need it. And after all, what do you know about politics? You are not a career politician. You have even left your home country when you were a young student, 35 years earlier. How can you go back now and serve and lead 3 ministries in a post-revolution country? Don't set up yourself to commit a career suicide. Just call him back and thank him for the honor, and that's it. My wife was very, very worried. She told me this single call is now going to ruin our 10-day vacation. Because you will be thinking about this matter every day when you are on this vacation. And actually we did. It was the single subject matter at breakfast, at lunch, at dinner. And it was, are you going to say yes to him? We are telling you, don't. And my wife kept reminding me of the specific context of Tunisia 3 years after its revolution. An uprising that was started by a young street vendor who saw his fruits and vegetables confiscated by a police officer because he was selling them without a permit. And when he complained to the local authority, he was even humiliated and beaten up. In a single act of despair, Mohammed Bouazizi set himself on fire and committed suicide. That ignited nationwide uprising, and the protesters were asking for jobs, freedom, and democracy. And they were telling the 23-year running dictatorship game is over. This was led by unorganized youth, men and women, nationwide. But the poor people also joined in. They felt being forgotten in the inlands of the country. They felt very much being second-class citizens in their own country. Look at this poor man using his loaf of bread, his baguette, to aim at the machine guns of the police force. Unlike previous uprisings, whereby the media did not say a word because the media was censored by the dictator. This time, social networks displayed photos, pictures, information, and Facebook became the center of command and coordination among the protests. On January 14, 2011, the dictator had one choice: to flee the country. And Tunisia started enjoying a nascent democracy with a new, fair, and free elections for the first time in its history. An Islamist-led government took the power, and most regretfully, a year later, Tunisia witnessed its first political assassinations in its history, which led to major uprising by civil society and opposition parties. Tunisia was at the brink of civil war in the summer and fall of 2013. Thanks to a quartet made of 4 civil society associations, the Business Association, the Labor Union, the Tunisian League for the Defense of Human Rights, and the National Bar Association, this quartet initiated and facilitated the national dialogue to find a way out. The consensus was the Islamist government has to leave power to a non-partisan technocrat government led by the prime minister they chose, Mr. Mahdi Jum'a, the person who called me on that Christmas morning at Charles de Gaulle Airport. So here we are as a technocrat government. But before I show you this, maybe let me ask you this question. How many of you would have accepted this job of 1 year in a high turbulence environment with all the sacrifices? You'll have to live on your savings financially. And to lead 3 ministries, and you are not a career politician. What would you have told the prime minister? I don't see much enthusiasm in the room. I see people shaking their head no. I don't see them nodding their head yes. That means that you would have rejected this offer. Well, I did accept it. I packed a suitcase, flew to Tunis, leaving behind a crying family. And I thought this was the call to serve my country. This was the call of duty. After all, Tunisia gave me 2 government scholarships, one to study in Paris and one to study in New York City. And the time has come to pay my dues. So I joined this government, a wonderful team made of technocrats coming from different backgrounds: finance, industry, consulting, diplomacy, public sector, private sector, half of which made of Tunisian expatriates like myself, who spent between 20 and 35 years abroad. Brazil, USA, UK, France, Switzerland, Germany, led by our prime minister. But what I want to share with you is 3 lessons I took away from this experience. The first lesson is survival cannot be taken for granted. Political survival, but also physical survival. From my first day in office to my last day in office, I faced nationwide strikes by students, hundreds of thousands of them, by university professors, by telecom workers, by postal service employees, by research center technicians, and the list goes on and on. As you can see, sometimes they surround my ministry building. They don't let anybody in, nobody out. And I can see them from the last floor of the building. I see the crowd, and I hear the hostile slogans, sometimes aiming at the minister. But besides the protests, the media bashing was a daily event, spreading sometimes misinformation, rumors, or even lies to tarnish my image or to weaken my position. Violence and insecurity in the country. Sometimes I had local officials calling me on the eve of field visits, discouraging me from going ahead with those visits. because of intelligence information. And I had to be escorted by the special police forces sometimes when I made some field visits. Survival cannot be taken for granted in this type of position. My second lesson is to deliver on the expectations and carry out the mission. I needed to be mentally strong and emotionally resilient. Thanks to the support of my family, but also thanks to the trust of my Prime Minister, who, when the political critics of my decisions went to see him and asked for my replacement, the Prime Minister told them, I know who is Mr. Jelassi, I chose him, and I trust him, so I'm not going to replace him. And when they went on to say, keep him then, but overturn his decisions. You are, after all, his boss. His answer was, in his ministry, Mr. Jelassi is his own boss. Therefore, I'm not going to override his decisions. Without that unwavering support and trust of your boss, of my Prime Minister, I would not be able to be emotionally resilient. And thirdly, the wonderful team of colleagues I worked with. Initially, we were some individuals. We didn't even know each other. As you can see from this photo, this was the day we were sworn in as government minister. And you can see from the faces, stone-faced individuals. There wasn't the slightest smile on anybody's face. Everybody was feeling the heavy weight of the responsibility. You wonder whether this group just went out of a swearing-in ceremony or just out of funeral.
But over time, they became friends. They became my support structure. We spent part of our weekends together in informal meetings, having a meal at each other's place, or even playing soccer games together. My third lesson I would like to share with you is, when you are in this type of a high turbulence context, in the face of adversity, opposition, political upheaval, and social turmoil, you have to make some big decisions that can impact millions of people. Sometimes they are life or death decisions. And you are lowly at the top, at your ministry. And you may receive some divergent advice from your subordinates. And you don't know what to do. Should you say yes to the demands of the protesters? Should you say no? Should you postpone the decision? Should you take it now? Should you make it a qualified decision? After that, at the end of the day, you have to listen to your beliefs. You have to live with your values. And you have to listen as well to your instincts. Because at the end of the day, you have to take that decision. You have to defend it. And you have to be ready to embrace the chaos or the consequences of that decision.
To illustrate this, let me start with my first priority as I saw it. Reforming the higher education system of Tunisia. And some subordinates told me, you are a transition government. You don't have the time to reform higher education in the country. You are here for just 1 year. So don't even start on that. But I thought, when I look at cafes filled with young university graduates who are jobless, waiting for their first employment, we have almost 300,000 university graduates being without a job. Hundreds, sometimes thousands of them having a doctoral degree in sciences and still waiting for that first job. Living with their parents and relying on pocket money they may get from their father or mother. What type of dignity do we offer to them? Somebody without a job, without a place where to live. For me, we should not waste time. Reforming higher education was the #1 priority. So I started with the concept of education for self-employment. Why? Because government is overstaffed, cannot hire. Private sector is made of small, medium-sized enterprises in 93% of the cases and cannot create hundreds of thousands of new jobs per year for the university graduates. So what is left? Well, what is left is to encourage these young people to use their competence, and we give them the confidence to start a new project, to launch a startup, to give them the financing, to give them the incubators, the technology, the physical space, and to give them the mentoring and the tutoring. So we need to change the mindset to say it's not only education for employment, it is also education for self-employment. and to review our curricula, to introduce courses on entrepreneurship, on management, on technology, on business modeling, as to have this confidence. And of course, I had to do it in an inclusive way, involving university presidents, involving the ecosystem stakeholders. So this is not Minister Jelassi's reform. This is everybody's reform, the way we see the university evolving for the coming 10 years. That was one, and I'm happy that I saw the formal approval of this reform before I left office. Second, how can we turn Tunisia into a digital destination, not only a touristy destination? How can we e-transform the country? How can we create new jobs for the 12,000 plus IT graduates who are jobless? How can we put outsourcing, offshoring, IT-enabled services made by Tunisian IT graduates in Tunisia for European, American, and foreign companies who will have quality design, research, development work at a fraction of the cost if they do that work in Europe or elsewhere? And thirdly, what type of decision to make in the face of mounting students' protests? Not only protests in the streets, but sometimes they storm the ministry compound, chanting very hostile slogans and asking for a fourth chance to register in the same academic year of study after having failed 3 consecutive years their final exams. They were asking for a fourth chance, which is something illegal. But when I said no to it, guess what happened? I met with their representatives to explain my stand and why I couldn't say yes to their demands. But the protests escalated into hunger strikes for more than a week. And even beyond hunger strikes, they set up gallows on the roof of university buildings, blackmailing and threatening the minister to commit suicide if he did not say yes to their demands. For me, that was an ultimate moment of truth. Shall I just say yes to their demands and try to put an end to this nationwide movement? Or shall I stick to my beliefs and defend my position in spite of the adversity and the opposition? Did I want to have blood on my hands before finishing this mandate? Did I want to risk even maybe the fall of the government I belonged to? Of course, leading in a high turbulence environment required finding trade-offs or compromises, but sometimes making very hard decisions. Tunisia continued as a startup democracy, and the government I belonged to was able to organize and run parliamentary and presidential elections as it was stipulated in the roadmap given to us by the National Dialogue Quartet. This was our first mission to accomplish, and we are able to do it in spite of the insecurity. Election campaigns ran smoothly, and we had 3 rounds of elections finished before our mandate terminated. The happiest news we got last December was when Tunisia was granted the 2015 Nobel Peace Prize for its bloodless and smooth transition to democracy. My colleagues and I take humble pride in having implemented the roadmap that enabled the organization of the elections and this bloodless transition.
When I reflect back, I think of the potential and the power behind the single word yes. If I had said no, I would not be here tonight to share my story with you. By saying yes, I had the opportunity to serve my country and become part of an extraordinary journey that has allowed millions of Tunisians rights, freedom, and democracy. In saying yes, I also changed my sense of self for life. What else is possible to expect of myself? I learned that leaving a powerful legacy begins by saying yes when others won't. And it is a word that has made all the difference. What positive difference do you want to make? What might be your legacy if you dare to say yes when the call comes?
So, when the call comes, say yes, believe in yourself, take the challenge on. When the call comes, pick it up and try to serve well your community and your country. When the call comes,
say yes, it will lead you to new horizons.